After all the excitement of the previous night, I decided to stay awake for a while as I really couldn't sleep anyway. Eventually, I heard my guardian stirring, so I went in to check on her. When I walked into the room, I saw my guardian curled up in the corner of the room, clutching the blankets around her. She looked like a scared child that has seen the boogeyman, Baba Yaga, as she stared at the window. I looked at the window, but I couldn't see anything outside. The motion light was on, and I could see all the way to the neighbor's house. I walked up to the window and looked closer. Still nothing. That's when she screamed, "Don't open the window!" I stopped and turned to her. The fear in her eyes was at a new level now. I kept looking back to the window and then back to her, but I still couldn't see what she could see. I asked, "What is it?" She responded in a shaky voice, "Angels. Hunter angels." Her voice was now reaching the point where I knew she would piss herself soon. I still couldn't see anything, but I did hear something. I could hear what sounded like the movement of wings. They sounded large and so incredibly quiet, almost that of an owl's wings. It was almost like listening to that owl in flight as it went back and forth from in front of the window. Nearly silent, though just enough movement to be noticed by those listening close. Moving around to her, I became the new guardian. I wrapped my arms around her and picked her up, rotating her so that her back was to the window. She was shaking uncontrollably as I held her there. She kept her head on my shoulder and wrapped her arms, legs, and tail around me so tight I was wondering when I would hear my ribs crack. Even after a few minutes, she was still shaking hard enough that my kidneys were being hurt. I tried to comfort her and slowly stroking her hair, which was still silky smooth, and telling her, "It's all right, and you're safe." Eventually I asked, "What did you see?" hoping the past tense would help calm her a little. With a shaky voice, she said, "Angels. Hunter angels." I was curious, so I asked, "What are hunter angels?" She took a deep breath before answering, "They're angels who carry holy weapons." Taking another deep breath, "They come to take us away if we're lucky." Confused, I asked, "Lucky?" Still stuttering, "If you're not lucky, they'll end you. It is, oh God, oh God." She started shaking even harder now, and she began to have a full-blown panic attack. Her limbs began to clamp down so tight that it was even getting difficult to breathe. Her breathing increased to the point of hyperventilation. She got to the point where she began to bite my shoulder at the base of the neck out of sheer fear. I could feel the blood begin to drip down my back and chest as I continued to comfort her. "I've got you. Okay, I've got you," I said in the best tone I could muster, considering the pain in my neck she was being. "They will not touch you." I got her ear right next to my mouth and whispered, "I will protect my house and those who are part of my house." This seemed to calm her a bit as she loosened up just a little. Taking my first deep breath since I picked her up, I turned to the window and yelled, "Those with malice in their hearts are not welcome in this house." This seemed to amuse them, as I could hear the faint sound of laughing. Again, I yelled at the window, "I said, piss off!" And all the laughing suddenly stopped. The air was dead silent for a few minutes at least, which seemed like over 10 minutes at the time. Then I could hear something just outside the window. It was almost like someone was talking at a whisper, just low enough that I couldn't understand what was being said, though I could see the window get a small, very minute crack in it. The sound of metal on glass echoed through the empty house as a streak began to appear across the glass. I couldn't see what it was, but something was being dragged across the glass, cutting into the glass window itself as it went from high on the right to low on the left. Slowly, it made a slice across the glass, making sounds similar to metal scraping against metal. When the line was done, there was a few moments of silence. Then another slow and methodical cut was started on the opposite side. My heart suddenly jumped as I knew what they were doing. Once they made the X across the glass, even a light breeze would break it, allowing them entry. All I could do was hold her and think, what can I do? That is when I tried something I knew would fail. Holding out my hand to the window, I yelled out, "For the love of God, stop!" And the line stopped moving. "Speak the name of the one you have come for." There was a moment of silence before what sounded like dozens of voices sounding off in unison. The name rumbled through the house, and instantly my guardian relaxed. I recognized the name, and it sure wasn't hers. I suddenly burst out laughing, but was able to bring myself back after a few seconds. "You dumbasses!" I yelled at the still empty window. "Does she look like him?" I yelled as she turned her head towards the window. If it wasn't for a mouthful of blood, she would have just looked like any other scared woman. There was another silence filling the air that seemed to last until my guardian yelled, "What do you want with my brother?" I couldn't hear anything as I felt her shake her head, and she asked, "What did he do?" Confused, I kept looking back and forth from the window to her. She must have gotten a response as she looked a bit shocked and disappointed at the window. A few moments later, she squeezed me tight as a sound of a gale-force wind hit the house, shattering the window and blowing glass across the room. I covered us with my arm and then turned to the window. My guardian looked at the window and began to let go. "They're gone," she said before taking a few calming breaths. I turned and said, "Good. Can you let me breathe now?" She realized how tightly she was holding me and then let me go. I stood up and put my hand on my shoulder. Pulling my hand back, I could see I was still bleeding, pretty good in fact. In fact, half of my shirt was still red and wet with fresh blood. My guardian apologized profusely for hurting me, but I just told her it's okay. I went to the bathroom and pulled out the first aid kit, and I was so happy that I just purchased this thing no more than 2 weeks ago. Seeing that it was simple puncture wounds, I figured I wouldn't need stitches, but cleaning these wounds was going to be a whole bunch of not fun. Pouring half a bottle of alcohol on the holes, I had to do my best not to scream like a little girl. The large bandages were coated in antibiotic cream before I put them on. Thankfully, I had someone to tape up the back. Yeah. Once that was done, I used a washcloth and hot water to clean the rest of me. That is when she began to apologize even more. She was so scared that when she clamped down on me, especially with that tail, she had left the rest of my torso covered with black, brown, and purple bruises. If you look close, you can even tell where her tail had clamped around my torso, leaving the most noticeable of impressions. I didn't say it to her, but I was really starting to hate that tail. Once cleaned up, I headed to the garage. I always kept some scrap wood around, and that window would need to be covered. This was not a fun job in the middle of the night with the jacked up torso, though as I worked, I had to ask about the conversation. "So, you want to tell me what you and that whatever in the hell it was were talking about?" I asked her. She looked away for a few moments before answering. It was my brother." Her silence compelled me to pry just a little bit more. "Yeah, I got that part. What did he do?" She took a breath and answered with, he fucked up." I turned and said, "I figured that. What did he do?" She raised her voice and said, "I told you, he fucked up," as she pointed up. It took me a second to get what she was saying. I had to pry for details, and it turns out he tried to convince a group of angels to take out the boss. The boss down below, that is, not the one up high. Because of the assault on the throne of hell, and the fact that less than half of the angels returned, has caused all sorts of havoc on both sides. Due to this, the more demonic and angelic creatures of this world have gotten much more active. If this keeps going the way, the physical world could become a battlefield itself. If this happens, the resulting natural disasters could wipe out 97% of the world's current population. The last time this happened, the only thing people remembered was the flood. Well, that explains the unexpected visit from her father. And here, I thought the worst problem we had was politicians. If it wasn't for the loss of blood, it would have been very difficult for me to sleep that night. With the window boarded up and the bandages still holding, I just had to go to bed and get some sleep. Someone else followed me the whole way there. When I asked, "What are you doing?" she simply said, I don't want to be alone tonight." I took a deep breath before motioning her inside. As she jumped onto the bed, I told her with a firm tone, "No funny business.